All right, welcome back everyone. To the last session of Python. In this session, we're just gonna go quickly over the input methods that we didn't go on in last class, and then I'm gonna tell you how to like submit your projects at the end, and you guys can submit that for in order to win a game or like in order to win a prize. Okay, so last class, we went over how to do like for loops and like while loops, and then we also learned like conditional statements. So now this class, we're gonna learn how to do input functions where the user who's like operating the program can introduce or like input something, and then the program like uses that input and then calculates and then runs like certain things. So does before we get started, does anyone have questions on what we did last time? All right, let's get started then. So in order to do an input function, you're basically gonna have to like store it in a variable. So how you do it is you can like do a variable. So let's just say x equals, and you could do input. So in order to do an input, you get input and then parentheses and whatever you have to type in here. So let's say, what is your age? So when we run that, the let's run that, and then it asks for your age. So we can say like 12, right? So now what happens is that when the user inputs the age, it gets stored in the value of x, and then you could use x to like do whatever you want. So like calculate things and whatnot. So now we can do simply let's do print age is, and then we'll do x, and just show like how it's storing your thing. So we'll go. So age is 17. So that's kind of like input functions. So one thing about input function is that whenever you do an input function, even though I put 17 here, this is actually being stored as 17 as like a string and not an integer. So if I were if you noticed that anytime we like have like a number and we're trying to like print it with like a string, we have to convert the number into string. And here I just ran X and it didn't give me an error and it actually run. This is because of the same thing that I was talking, where input function always takes the input in as a string, not an integer. So let's say if you wanted to do this as a number, right? So in order to do a number, we kind of just convert this into integer, just like we learned in the previous class, where we just surround this into with a bracket of integer that we're converting. And now when we run it, it's going to give us an error. So I'm going to say 17 and it's going to give us an error. Why? Because now it's not a string on line 3. So because this it's an integer, we have to convert this into a string down here. So now we run it, it should run. So your age is 17 because we converted it into a string. So I'll show you guys a real quick example of how to use this and like why we would use input methods and like one example of that. So let's say you were to create like a program that determines if you can drive. So in order to drive and get a license, you have to be 16. So what we could do is we could create an if statement. So we can say if x is greater than or equal to 16, right, you can drive. Then we could do else, right, you can't drive. And now, so now let's try the same thing. So what is your age? And let's say we're 12. So it's gonna say you can't drive. So what it's doing is takes the number, it's a string, so then it converts it into int from this, stores it into x, then it compares x over here. So because value of 12 is less than 16, so it's gonna run the else statement at the if statement. Now, if we were to run this again, and I'd say 17, you can drive because 17 is greater than 16. So this is like one way you could use x. Now, other ways you could do this is sometimes you can like determine like the length of the list or like how long you want to make a list or run like a for loop, let's say. So like let's say you wanted to enter your grades. So what we could do like and a small example of that is that we could say grades equals create an empty list. Then we could do n equals, that's just a variable. Actually, let's name it something else. We'll say grade equals in input what is the grade you want to enter. And then we'll run that. And then we could say grades dot append, and then we could say grade. So now what this is going to do is when we run the input, it's going to take whatever the input is, and it's going to put it into the grades list. So now let's say we could, to add on to another step, we could say x equals in input, and then we could say how many grades you want to enter. Now we run that, and then what we're going to do is for all right, let's run this. So a quick rundown of what this is going to do before we enter this. Before we run this is I've created an empty list called grades. Then I've put in a variable x for number of grades you want to enter, then a for loop, and I print at the end the list. So what the for loop right here is doing is that it's asking how many grades do you want to put. So let's say 5, right? So it's going to repeat this thing for 5 times. So it's going to ask you 5 times a grade you want to enter. So that's this function right here. So it's going to ask you what grade you want to put. Then when you put in your grade, it's going to append it into the grades list. So it's going to take the variable grade, which is right here, and it's going to append it into the list, and then it prints out the list at the end. So when we run it for I in range, there you go. Okay, so let's say enter 5 grades. So your first grade would be 90. Then we could do 91, 92, 93, and 95. So then it prints out 91, 92, 93, and so forth. So this is a simple tutorial, or like not simple tutorial, but like this is a simple example of how you could like incorporate like inputs and like different things to make like a little bit more complex program. So like before we just took one input and we just printed out. Now we could do this multiple inputs from like a for loop, and then we could like even expand this to like, we could do like your grade is this, convert it and everything. So it's like you could get pretty extensive with inputs. So now same thing. Let's say you didn't want a input of integer. Let's say you want a float, so you could change it to float. You could also change it to Boolean. So with Boolean, what's going to happen is you have to either enter true or false. So it can be a little tricky based on what the user enters. So let's say if they like enter like a small t instead of a capital T, it can mess the program up depending on like how you have like your rest of your program developed. So like if we were to like compare it, so it depends on how you use it and like different things you put into your um program to control like your inputs. But most commonly, when input functions are used, it's either just to input a string or an integer or a float, not usually like a Boolean. So yeah. Any questions that regarding this before I give you guys like a summary of how to do the competition and how you guys can win prizes? Okay, no questions. Okay, so let's move on. So now, since this is like the last class for this hackathon, so we do have a competition that has prizes. So the competition consists of two parts. One is a 25 question quiz that I would um, demonstrate how you guys can access the quiz. You get three attempts to take it, and it's not really timed, but I had to put like a time limit on the quiz. So I did put like a 4 hour time limit, but it should be more than enough for you guys to complete the quiz because it should be everything that we covered in these series of hackathon. And following the quiz, there's also a coding competition of where you guys have to create a program on a topic that I'm gonna give you guys. I'm gonna give you guys like something that you have to solve, and you guys have to create a program to solve that problem. And you guys can submit that program, and you guys have till September 30th. So to complete all of this and submit your program. And in October, we're gonna be announcing the winners of the hackathon. So the prizes for the hackathon is whoever gets first place gets $100 gift card, second place gets a $75 gift card, and third place gets a $50 gift card. And anyone else who attends automatically gets a $25 participation gift card. So with that being said, let's start with the demonstration on how to access the quiz. So to access the quiz, you guys have to log on to the starlight.org. It's a app that we developed. It's a platform for everyone who can take a quiz on here, and like there's multiple different quizzes for a lot of different subjects. So you guys can see like science live, there's math, honors, there's chemistry, ACT test, biology, US history. So there's a bunch of different quizzes that you guys can try for free. So I'll put the link to the website in the chat and I'll walk you guys through on how to make an account and get started with the quiz. So before we get started, I'm just gonna publish the quiz real quick for everyone to be able to see. So just give me 2 minutes and meanwhile, you guys can take a break and try to practice the input functions and get more familiarized with it. Okay. So does anyone have questions on anything we've learned so far, or any of this before I walk you guys through the demonstration? So I'll give you guys a real quick recap of everything we learned so far in the hackathon series. So class one, we learned the basics of Python. We learned how to print basic statements, change different types of data into like different forms. So like example, if it would be like convert from string to int or from int to string, and Boolean. We learned about floats. We learned how we could find out what type of variable we have using the type function. We also learned how to do basic math operations, divide, multiply. We rounded things off. And then we learned how to create variables, of course. And then second session, we learned about other things. Like we learned about lists and dictionaries. We learned about like how lists can be like changed and they're manipulative, but tuples aren't. And then tuples cannot be changed. And then we also learned about dictionaries, which are kind of like a combination of both tuples and lists. And then last class or like last week, we learned about for loops, while loops, if and else statements, where we learned how we could use like different kind of conditions to maneuver the program into like what we needed to do. So we could create like a condition of like if let's say A is true, B is true, and then either C or D is true, then we can run this. But if any of this is false, then you can't run anything. So we learned how to create like that. We learned about order of precedence. We learned about like and or and how to like negate something with like the not function. And then we also learned today, we learned about inputs, where how we could do an input of anything, use that to like code and how we use this in programming. So anyone has any questions with that, and then I'll walk you guys through the quiz. Okay. So let's get started. So I'm just gonna log out real quick. And then we'll go to home. And okay. So I send the link to the website in the chat for everyone. So when you click on the website, and the website is thestarlight.org in case you guys wanted to see that. And when you guys click, you're going to be directed to the main page, which has all of our quizzes right here. So in order to sign in, click on the sign up tab right here. Click for student, since you guys will be creating an account with student, and it's going to redirect you to this page. So here, there's two ways to register. You can like put your name, email address, password, and everything, or you could and then sign up this way, or you could sign up with Google, click it, and then sign up with whatever email ID you want to sign up with. And it's just a lot quicker because you don't have to do any of like this stuff right here. So when you do get logged in, you're going to be redirected. So I'm not sure how the student page looks like, but you guys can always after signing in, you guys can click home and you're going to be redirected to this. So the quiz, matter of fact, is right here. It's called Python. It's an easy level quiz. Number of questions 25. You get 240 minutes per attempt. You do have 3 attempts, and in order to pass the quiz, you have to get 80%. So other way you guys can find the quiz is to search Python into the search bar. So if you search up Python, click hit search, and there's gonna be only one Python quiz, and that's the one. So you guys can like look over here just to make sure whenever you try the quiz, it's the correct one. So it should be named Python, level easy, quite 25 questions. It's for it's for middle school grades, but I just put 7 because kind of like around there. So it's for grade 7. Time 240 minutes. But it shouldn't take you anywhere close to 4 hours. You should be done in